Hello, travelers! Now, I am sure many of you have worked with onions in your kitchen, and have inevitably become familiar with their tearful reputation. Some of you have probably even picked up a few tricks along the way in order to prevent you from crying when you cut into them. But I'm willing to wager that not many of you know exactly what it is in the onions that is making you cry. Well, today we will be talking about this, and how a bit of that knowledge can help you make onions taste even sweeter, and we'll be using caramelized onions as a demonstration of this. So you know what? Today is a special day, because today we will be using science! Now, like any good scientist or chef, we will have all of our ingredients prepared. We're going to have 2 onions that have been very thinly sliced. Vidalia or white onions can work for this, but I personally prefer Vidalia. We're also going to have a 1/4 cup of dry white wine. This is an optional step, but along the process, I think it really adds a lot of depth to the flavor. And we're also going to have a couple of tablespoons of a neutral cooking oil, like vegetable oil, and a little bit of salt. The key behind the crying power of onions lies in their cells. As we slice our onions, we tear open the cell walls within, which allow molecules to leach out and react with the atmosphere. Some of these are sulfur-containing compounds that react with the air to form sulfonic acids, and this is our culprit. These chemicals, the sulfonic acids, are the ones that will interact with our nasal passages, with our eyes and our tear ducts, and cause us to cry. Nasty little buggers. Likewise, these sulfur-containing compounds within the onions that form into sulfonic acids also contribute to the more acidic taste when you bite down into a raw piece of onion. With a bit of chemistry knowledge, we know that these sulfur-containing compounds, these sulfonic acids, are water-soluble. They will precipitate in an aqueous solution. So, here I have our thinly sliced onions, and what we are going to do is we are going to soak them in water. You see how the water gets all cloudy now? That is the sulfonic acids on the cut surfaces of the onions leaching out, precipitating into the water. We are going to dump this water out, and we are going to repeat this process of rinsing and dumping the water until it's nice and clear. Before we move forward, it's important to make sure that we dry off our onions, like, say with a dish towel or paper towel. We don't want a bunch of water on our onions when you introduce it to a hot pan, because the oil that we're going to put in there, plus the water, it's going to cause a whole mess, a lot of splatter. So make sure you dry off those onions. Now, to get our cooking started, we will want to set a pan on the stovetop over medium-low heat and let it warm for a few minutes. You always want to work with a warm pan whenever we're cooking anything. Once it is warmed, we are going to add our oil in. We're going to swirl it around to spread it out a little bit, and then we're going to give that about a minute or 2 to really warm up. You know that the oil is at a good temperature when you start to see the surface of it shimmer inside the pan. Once we see that, we will start adding our onions that we want to caramelize. The onions will probably give off just a little bit of moisture. You might see that pool in the bottom of the pan, but that's perfectly natural, and it's going to evaporate out. Once that water evaporates, we will add the wine to be reabsorbed into the onions. Now, as before, this is an optional step, by no means absolutely necessary, but I think it really adds something. It adds a bit more complexity to the caramelized onions at the end. We are going to be swirling our onions around, and gradually that wine is going to be absorbed or evaporated off. As we are cooking, we're making sure to keep the heat of the pan very controlled and stirring very frequently, as we want to control the caramelization of the natural sugars within the onion. Caramelization is a somewhat delicate process, and if the temperature drifts too high, then the sugars inside the onions will completely oxidize and degrade. They'll burn, and it'll just leave behind unpalatable charring. To properly caramelize these sugars, is a little bit of a sort of Goldilocks too hot, too cold situation. We want to keep it within a narrow band of temperature, which is why we keep that heat low and we keep that stirring constant. These sugars are going to caramelize the sucrose, the fructose, and the other sugars within the onions somewhere between 300 and 320 degrees Fahrenheit. Full caramelization is usually going to take around 40 to 60 minutes. It is a long process, it is labor intensive, but definitely well worth it if it's done right. As you can see, as we continue to work with our onions in the pan, stirring regularly, frequently, making sure that we control that temperature and keep it in that Goldilocks zone, the onions will start to pick up a more amber and brown color. What this is the sugars breaking down and reacting with each other, producing long polymer chains as they partially oxidize, called caramelons and caramelins. These are the compounds that will give that characteristic brown, nutty color. Likewise, other aromatics are forming as the onions are cooking. You'll notice that it will start to give off a much sweeter, nuttier aroma, and this is due to aromatics such as furans and maltol. We're going to keep stirring and keep reducing down until our onions have a full, nice, deep brown color to them. Once our onions have a deep brown color, we can remove them from the heat and use them as we please. Caramelized onions can be used to enhance many dishes. They are on burgers and sausages, they are the star ingredient of French onion soup, and if you're so inclined, you can get very creative with the ways in which you use them. As a personal example over here, I have taken some caramelized onions and used them to make a modified soubise sauce that I've then mixed into mashed potatoes for a decadent, sweet and savory side dish that goes perfectly with just about anything. This recipe is something that's a little bit extra that members for my Ko-fi will have access to. I will go by step exactly how to make this. It's a little bit more involved, but those that regularly give to help support this channel will have access to recipes like this and others. As always, I hope you enjoy your visit here, and I hope to see you again at the Hungry Shark Tavern.